Welcome to the GTN Show. Now, we are just 6 days on from that huge announcement from IRONMAN that the World Championships are returning to Kona in a one-day format. And I think we're all still feeling the ripple effects from that. But believe it or not, the world of triathlon has continued. There's plenty of racing. We've seen some incredibly fast running coming from Hayden Wilde. That was before, sadly, it all came crashing down with a rather horrific bike accident. We've also seen pro triathletes, both current and retired, venturing into more gravel races. And the T100 have also had their own new race announcement with the T100 Gold Coast, Australia coming next year. So plenty to cover in this week's show. Okay, it's now time to look at things that I spotted online. Aside from the dominating IRONMAN World Championship news, spotted some very fast running coming from Hayden Wilde. Now, he was over in Tokyo ahead of the Yokohama WTCS race that's coming up. And he's been focusing, well, I guess, doing triathlon and running. He won the 10-mile race just last weekend in Antwerp. And then out in Tokyo, he was doing the very aptly named Tokyo Speed Race with the aim of trying to beat the national record for New Zealand. And that was a time of 27 minutes 28 for 10K. I mean, that's hard to get your head around. Anyway, he didn't manage that. He did run a PB. He clocked a time of 27:39, which is phenomenally fast, and was obviously flying in a great form. We've already seen him win the WTCS in Abu Dhabi. We've seen him win the T100 in Singapore, and looks like it's been or going to be the year for Hayden Wilde. Until sadly, the day after his race, when I imagine he was still on a massive high, he's had a really nasty bike accident. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, but we do sadly know that he has broken several ribs. He's broken his scapula and he's damaged his lungs, I presume, with those broken ribs. And as a result, he's going to be stuck in Tokyo for a few weeks because he can't fly due to the damage to his lungs. So that just shows the highs and lows of being an athlete, and quite horrific. So we are wishing Hayden a really speedy recovery because it's been so exciting seeing him continue to improve at such a rate. So no doubt he will be back stronger, but maybe just a little bit further down through the season. So yeah, fingers crossed he is back very soon. Now, another athlete who has succumbed to a bit of a tumble on the bike, thankfully not as serious, Alistair Brownlee was racing the Tracker 360, the huge gravel race that has been held in Girona over the last weekend. And we did see a few triathletes taking part. We've obviously seen Alistair really retiring from triathlon, yet still very much doing all of the three sports. And he was obviously hoping for a much better day, but sadly, he actually crashed out before the first aid station when he just put this post here. Not the day I was hoping for, crashed out before the first aid station when my steering tube snapped and I hit the deck hard. I mean, that sounds quite serious. Thankfully, nothing broken, just a few cuts, bruises, and a sore body. Gutted not to finish, especially with how much I was enjoying the course up to that point. Hate DNFing, but sometimes out of your hands. That was most certainly out of his hands, but hopefully nothing too serious. Ruth Arstle was also taking part in that gravel race, and she's put probably one of the hardest, most enjoyable races I have done, and that's coming from a triathlete who's done a lot of Ironman racing. She says, things I have learned, a 70.3 5 days out isn't the best prep. Chafage from a 360 kilometre on gravel is worse than Ironman. Ooh, don't really want to imagine that. Yeah, and she finishes by saying 360 kilometres is a very long way, and yet, Ruth, we are well aware of that. Well done for completing and being competitive. Georgia Taylor-Brown, who's also really not been committing herself to triathlon this year, she was on the start line of the 100k. She said, even if it was just for the 100k, it was a great event to be part of. You've got to start somewhere, hey. If you haven't done a gravel event before, do one, and then do another, because they're so much fun. I promise you won't regret. Well, I don't think those guys were paid by the Tracker, but they have certainly made it look really appealing, and my newsfeed has been full of lots of people in and outside of triathlon of racing that gravel race. So maybe it's one for GTN to add to their bucket list. Maybe not the 360k though. On to Tri News, and yes, of course, the main headline has to be the IRONMAN World Championships returning to Kona in a one-day format for 2026. Now, I don't believe that any of our viewers have missed this news, but you might have just missed how exactly we've got to this decision. So I thought I'd just take a moment, as it is just me, just to rewind and sort of explain how things have evolved over just the last few years. Don't worry, I'm not doing a deep dive into Ironman history. So basically, COVID is when it all started. Post-COVID, there were a lot of athletes who had slots that had rolled over. We saw the return of the Ironman World Championships in 2022 for the 2021 version. And that was the spring, that was May, in Utah and St. George. And lots of athletes decided, and were given the opportunity, to defer that and actually wait until it returned to Kona. Now, the racing returned to Kona, the Ironman World Championships, in 2022. For the 2022 World Champs that October. Now, this was one of a first. It was a split day race. So we had the women racing their World Championships on the Thursday, having their own coverage, their own day, and then the men on the Saturday. Now, this seemed to be the ideal solution. Ironman promised that this was going to then happen in 2023. They had open all those slots, so 2 separate days, so a huge amount of World Championship qualification opportunities. They then had to seriously backtrack because their agreement with Kona hadn't actually been sort of firmed up, and the locals and the mayor said that it was too much disruption for this small town on the island of Hawaii, and they couldn't have 2 days for road closures for this many athletes, etc., etc. And that was off the cards. So Ironman then had to really quickly think, how on earth are we going to have a World Championships for all these athletes that we've got that are already qualified? Well, their solution was to split the location for the men's and the women's. Now, this obviously had mixed reaction. That first year, so in 2023, we saw the first time that the World Championships went to Nice. That was for the men, so Nice in the south of France. The women went back to Kona for their women's only race, the first time we've seen that. And this was due to rotate for the next 4 years. So last year, we saw the men have their own day in Kona, the women had their own day in Nice. This year, again, it's women back to Kona, men to Nice. However, this contract has now been cut short by a year, and it will not be returning to Nice. And instead, it is returning to Kona in 2026 in a one-day format, as that is all that's allowed. Now, to give a little bit more of the background, Andrew Messick, the previous CEO, stepped down after 12 years, and Scott Deroux came into this role at the beginning of last year. And straight away, people, I think, were discussing with him, trying to explain the importance of Kona. And he took his time to try and work out just sort of the actual understanding of the sport and of Ironman and of what the athletes want, both the pros and the age groupers. And part of this, Ironman sent out a survey to over 10,000 stakeholders, including athletes, past, current, coaches, tri clubs, partners, to try to really get an idea of what was wanted. Now, probably not that much of a surprise. The ideal option that people voted for, the majority voted for, was to have it back in Kona in that 2-day format. Now, I wasn't on the ground when we had the Thursday and the Saturday, but apparently it was obvious that it was a bit too much capacity for the local area. And as a result, that is not actually an option. It was an option on the survey. It's not an option in reality. The second most favourite option was to return to a one-day format in Kona. And that is where we're at. Ironman have decided to do that. Now, obviously, that means that there are less slots. The qualification isn't open yet, so that's not a problem. There's no one who's not going to have their space. They are apparently saying that they can reach up to 3,000 athletes on the pier. Now, there's a quick statement here. I'm just going to read this paragraph from Ironman. We are now able to expand the number of athletes racing to nearly 3,000, a measured increase compared to prior single-day editions of the event. New content production technology will enable increased coverage of the race, including equal broadcast coverage for both professional men and women athletes as they showcase their talents and inspire future generations. Innovations in start times and swim waves will support competitive integrity and fairness among athletes. Okay, well, that is the top line. There's a lot of repercussions and, as a result, sort of numbers and things to talk about. But James and I have done a very thorough deep dive into the whole topic when the news came out. So if you are interested and you want to see more or listen to more about this huge change in the Ironman World Championships, then I would suggest going to watch that or listen to it. And do get involved in the comment section below. We have read all the comments and we will be looking at one or two later on as we get towards the end of the show. But as it is just me here today, I am having to remove my opinion a little bit because I feel it would be unfair and a little bit one-sided. But as a woman, I have had quite a lot to digest on this one, but I'm going to leave it there. Now, Sort of as a side note, and something that you might have missed and might have been overlooked, is there's been a new announcement for the 70.3 World Championships of 2 new dates, or 2 new locations, and that is for 2026 and 2028. Any guesses? Yeah, it is in Nice. So obviously we were expecting to see a World Championships of sort in 2026. We are still seeing that. It is just the 70.3. I shouldn't say just. It is the 70.3 World Champs. They will still be over 2-day format, which so the men and the women have their own separate day and equal slots for that, as far as I'm aware. And obviously it's going to be returning 2 years later in 2028. That does leave 2027 still to be announced for what location it is. And it's interesting, we saw the 70.3 World Champs in 2019, which was a brilliant race to be at. But this is going to be the first time we're seeing the 70.3 World Champs go from Europe straight back to Europe since it started rotating. So obviously we are going to be in Marbella in Spain this year, and then it will be in Nice in France the year after. But I imagine Ironman are trying to sort of balance their relationship with Nice and that 4-year contract that they had. We also have another race announcement, this time from the Professional Triathletes organisation. They have a new addition to their T100 World Tour Series. They are going down under. They're moving to Australia for the start of next year's season. The Gold Coast is going to be hosting their first race on the 21st to 22nd of March. Now they've got the pro race and the age group race and a 10K running event as well. Now the pros are actually going to be swimming in the Surfers Paradise Beach, which is a pretty iconic location. And I think Australia are very excited to a country that's so passionate about triathlon. They've got the Olympics coming in 2032, so it's very cool to see another event happening in that part of the world. Ash Gentle, who's been sort of one of the stars of the T100, actually lives in Queensland, on the Gold Coast, so she is evidently very excited to have that event coming, and I think it's just a really nice, cool, iconic start for the season for next year. On to race news, and aptly we're actually starting with an event from Australia. It was a 70.3 Port Macquarie. Sadly though, it became a duathlon as heavy rain overnight actually forced them to cancel the swim due to the water quality. That did not stop Natalie Van Coverdon and the women's side. She had the fastest bike, fastest transition and the fastest run to take the overall win. Amelia Watkinson was second and Skye Wallace third in the women's race. Now the men's race was won by Henrik Ghosh. Sam Osborne and Caleb Nabel were second and third. We also had one other 70.3. This was Venice Gisolo in Italy. And the women's race was dominated by Solveig Losveth of Norway. She had the fastest bike split by a considerable margin. Apparently she biked faster than 14 of the male pros with a 2:06. Her overall time, a 3:53, gave her the win by 6 minutes ahead of Lena Meissner of Germany, and Amélie Morier from France was third. On the men's side, it was actually Panagiotis Bitardos from Greece who took the win ahead of Cameron Main in second and Emil Holm in third. And this win for Panagiotis was actually his only second ever 70.3 and his second win, having won the European Championships last year. And at 21 years of age, I think he's going to be one that we need to keep an eye on for sure. Now, slightly closer to home, I should rephrase that, very close to home, we had the Xterra World Cup Series in the UK in the fabulous Western Park. And I'm not just talking about these results because our very own Mark was racing. He did even mix it up with the elites and went in the main race, which is very ballsy, I'd like to say. He finished 27th in overall in the men and women in the elite category, which we are looking forward to hearing far more on that. Don't worry, there is a video coming. But for the pro results on the podium, it was Felix Faricia who took the win for the men ahead of Great Britain's Will Draper and Arthur Faricia third. Those names you might be familiar with Xterra. They are the dominant forces. And the same with the women's. It was Elise Patisse who took the victory there ahead of Anita Grabmüller, and Isla Headley finished third. Now, coming up, we have 70.3 St George. And it feels like there's a lot of hype around this race, partly because it's sadly the last time we're going to see the 70.3 being held in Utah. And secondly, because, well, it's looking like a very exciting lineup indeed. Now, we do have the battle of the Canadian versus American, Lionel Sanders versus Sam Long. We know they're good buddies and they train a bit together. Well, they have shared quite a few of the victories over the last few years. Lionel won it in 2016, 2018 and 2021. 2021. However, Sam Long is the defending champion, having won it both 2023 and in 2024. Now, adding into the mix, we've got Magnus Ditlev, who is going to be on the start line. He's got bib number 3. So it's looking like a really exciting race between those three. We've also got Jackson Laundry racing, Trevor Foley, Cam Worth potentially. He is on that start list. Who knows if he'll actually be there. Then we've got Paula Findlay as defending champion on the women's side. Chelsea Sodaro, if she's recovered from that bug, will hopefully be racing. We're excited to see her. Jackie Herring, Danielle Lewis, who are all really fighting for that the overall Ironman Pro Series as well. So if you are wanting an exciting race to watch, I would suggest tuning in to 70.3 St George this weekend. Time for Try Spy, and last week we had this photo. Now, most of you got it right. So there were a couple of wrong guesses. I should say guesses because one is very wrong. We have Diego Padilla, who says the photo is Paula Findlay. Nah, it's not. We also have Highway Star, who says Trevor Foley. The rest of you, however, realised it was Ruth Arstle. And I thought the face looked familiar, and I did guess it was Ruth. However, I did not realise that quite how long ago this photo was taken, because I shared a podium with Ruth Arstle. That's maybe my claim to fame. That was back from 2017, just before the channel had launched. That's how long ago it was taken. Anyway, lots of you did get it right. We've got James Y9W8Q says Struth, it's Ruth Arstle. Jan Stelsner, Ruth Arstle. Basically, lots of people saying Ruth Arstle. So well done, guys. But yeah, you guys were pretty good on this one. So see how tuned in you are for this photo we've got for you this week. Say what? Okay, as I mentioned last week, James and I did go into full deep dive on this huge news from the Ironman World Championships. And as a result, we've had a huge amount and a huge array of variety of comments from you guys. And that's what I love about you, our viewers. We've got such different opinions and we have read them all. Sadly, we don't have time to reply to every single one. And I'd love to read them all out now, but we also don't have time for that. Instead, I have chosen just 3, which I think all give us something to think about without me having to add too much of my own thoughts. So we have this one from Jabilia2. I'm a full supporter of equal opportunity, and I did vote to have men and women race on the same course with a rotating location. Ironman doesn't owe men or women anything. World Champs is a race for the elite, not a race for everyone. I could say lots on that. I'm not going to right now. We have Colin M, who says World Championship status should move around. Kona should stay as a race. Qualifying times a la Boston for Kona. Yeah, that one's been suggested a few times, of trying to sort of work out how to make the way of actually going to the World Championships more fair. But that word fair has been bandied about a lot in this argument, and I'm not going to go into it right now. Aim Right Psych says, on the proportionality, I don't think you should forget this applies to the men too. Often the younger age groups in males only had 1 to 2 slots compared to the 40 to 44 or 45 to 49, which had 6. What about the podium from each age group and gender get the slots, regardless of how many people are in a category? I'm not going to give my opinion right now because we haven't got enough time left in the show, but we would still love to know your thoughts. You can leave them beneath the show or that video if you go back to watch that one. That is on screen now for you to click on. And coming up later this week, we have a video coming from the world's largest triathlon. Yes, I was over in Taiwan last week for an absolutely incredible Challenge Taiwan event, and I'm still buzzing from it. It's really cool. So I would suggest keeping an eye out for that video when it comes. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. And if you have enjoyed it, give us a like.